Welcome to the best cooking video you're ever gonna see. Today I'm gonna show you how to make gnocchis, and it's like my great grandfather's recipe or something. And we're also gonna make a red meat sauce. We're gonna do that first. And first, you need to cut and chop one onion. Now that you chop your onion, and it's okay if it doesn't look as pretty as mine, since I am queen of the kitchen after all. We're gonna take our meat. I got a beef shank, it has a bone in it still. And we're gonna go brown that meat and saute the onion on the stove. Alright, so now that your pan is really hot, oh, this isn't open. Hold on, give me a second, kid. Nope. Alright, now that you have your oil, you can put a little bit in here. This is just gonna help the meat toast a little bit better. Alright, just ignore the smoke. Alright. And then you're gonna take your piece of meat and you just throw it in there, bone off, and we're just gonna let that brown on both sides. Alright, so now that your meat is browned, and ignore all the open windows in the background, you can grab your onions. You're gonna put your onions into the same pot and you're just gonna brown them and saute. So now that your onions are a bit cooked and they're a little brown, we're gonna pour in our canned tomato sauce. And then we're gonna fill up this same can with water. Woo! Alright, you can give it a little mix around. And then we're going to take our spices. I have oregano, Italian, basil, garlic powder, and salt. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take some of this garlic powder, and depending on the size of your pot, since this is a bigger pot, I'm just going to cover the top of the surface once. If you have a little bit smaller of a pot, you can just go back and then you can go over it again. There we go. We love the garlic powder. Alright, and basil leaves. You only want a little bit of basil leaves. About that much. Ideally, if you have like fresh basil leaves, you can just throw some in there. And then Italian's pretty strong, so you only want a little bit. And then oregano. Oops. This you can put a little bit more, but basically your garlic powder is going to be the most amount of seasonings you're going to put in here. And then some salt. Just salt to taste. Alright, and then you can just mix that around and you're going to bring it to a boil and you're just going to let it simmer for a couple of hours. And I know there's a big chunk of meat in here, but this is just going to cook down, and then even though there's a bone in it, eventually the meat will become so soft you can just take the bone out and then you just keep simmering it down. Now that we finished with my great-grandpa's sauce, we're going to start making the gnocchis. So it's going to be enough for about 2 people. It's supposed to be like a potato and a half per person. And then you're just going to peeled and cube them up, and then you're going to boil them. Now that you've peeled and cubed your potatoes, you're going to boil them until fork tender. And I trust you all enough to boil your own potatoes, so I'll come back when they're done. Now hopefully your potatoes are cooked, otherwise you're going to have some lumpy gnocchi. But I'm just going to mash up my potatoes until they're all flat and smooth. Alright, hopefully you had a stand mixer or hand mixer to mash your potatoes, or otherwise you're going to start looking like me. But now that they're mashed, we're going to add in the rest of the ingredients. So we're gonna add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I'm doing my gnocchis for about 4 or 5 people. So if you're doing it for only 2 people, you can add in like 1 teaspoon. I'm gonna add in roughly about 2 cups of flour. You're just gonna add enough flour to where your dough is soft, but it's not gonna be like too soft. You'll see what I'm talking about if you mess up. Then we're gonna add in about that much salt, probably somewhere around 2 teaspoons or something. And then I'm gonna also add in 2 eggs. And just give that a little mix around and you should have some gnocchi dough. Alright, now that you mixed together all your ingredients, you're just gonna knead this ball until it turns into some sort of usable dough. It should end up not sticky and it'll be nice and pillowy and smooth. So now that you finished rolling your gnocchi dough, you're gonna cut a little section off and you're gonna roll it into a cylinder, probably about the thickness of your thumb. And then you're gonna cut them into like little rectangles about the size of your thumb, like to this first joint, about that size. And then if you don't have a gnocchi maker like I do right now, you can take a fork and you want to make sure your fork is really well floured. So you just All right, and then what you want to do is you want to take your gnocchi and roll it along the grooves. And depending how soft your dough is, will tell you if you can actually see the marks or not. My dough right now is really soft, but like Bob Ross says, only happy little accidents, no mistakes. But this rolling process is going to take forever unless you have someone to help you out. So now that you've finished with all your gnocchis, you're going to boil some water and you're going to dump your gnocchis in there, and you're going to know they're cooked when the gnocchis float to the top. It's pretty cool. So I combined my sauce with my finished gnocchis. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and I hope you didn't set off any smoke alarms. Bon appetit.